Hey, reality. All right, so sitting out here in the sunset, I wanted to talk about a little bit more about this idea of heroic fiction and the kinds of stories that basically we've been writing ourselves as a society. Because I talked a little bit about this idea of like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, where it's like heroic fiction, but at the end of the fiction, basically the hero effectively gets, very little. Like say they get the congratulation, you're like, hooray, you saved the universe. But then a lot of it is actually kind of like either go off and die, or, go off and basically be by yourself, or, some form of these kinds of things where it's like, the payoff is almost like worse than basically the quest. You're like, all right, well, now you get to be isolated. Have fun. And it's a little strange. It's like we're almost kind of trying to dissuade ourselves from writing some of this kind of like heroic fiction, or from like having it appear basically in like our own actual lives. I mean, like, because you can still see this in a lot of other stuff. I mean, like, for example, The Game. It's a movie where they go through almost the entire film, and then at the very end, he's like, I was drugged and left for dead, and basically all I got was this T-shirt. And it's the same kind of thing. It's like I was punished and punished and punished and punished, and then at the end, they're like, hooray, it was all a game. And he's like, that's great. Why did I have to go through all of this horrible mess? Similarly, like American Beauty, another one of these films where it's like, the hero almost doesn't want to finish the film. I mean, he kind of does, because he's like, I kind of want to get with the girl. But at the same point, he's like, if I actually knew what was coming, would I? It's like, maybe it's not worth it. Who knows? It's like you're writing all this stuff where it's like, and in the end of the movie, the hero gets shot. It's like if all we write is tragedy, then in some sense, like, the whole kind of belief structure, like, starts moving towards tragedy. It's very similar to this idea that, like, if all you write is basically like apocalyptic fiction, then in some sense you're kind of like calling the apocalypse. You're like, hey, zombies, come and get us. And in some sense maybe you're talking to what it is that reality basically feels and sees around it, and kind of its like subtle underlying fears. But, in some sense, if like all you do is write basically big fiction where like rock smack things, then, after a while you may start basically running into that as like a real problem. I mean, particularly if, the universe is somehow belief-based. It's like you want to explore that stuff, but you want to try and avoid it a lot too. Not a whole lot of like deep impact, although, again, sex references. But still, none of the like planet-wide disaster, how do we cope kind of stuff. Because then, very soon it's like, oh, and here comes a big rock. But back on like the heroic fiction and basically kind of like avoiding being heroes almost, I mean, you still get even more of this kind of stuff. Like you get a lot of the kind of like Lost in Translation type of movies, where it's like, oh, hey, Bob, that was great. You did this whole thing. You went through all this torturous kind of stuff. I mean, you did get to have maybe a brief brush with like, love in your later age. But, at the end of the movie, it's like, and you almost got to sleep with Scarlett Johansson, but then, away it goes. It's very similar kind of stuff. It's like it shows up over and over and over. It's like, hey, stop that kind of stuff. I mean, in some sense, like the movie Stranger Than Fiction is almost a meta commentary against this kind of stuff as a movie itself. I mean, this is like a meta commentary on that. But I mean, really, it's like this idea of where the hero is kind of going around in the story, and then like he realizes, like, wait, you're like writing a tragedy where I'm about to die, and where the whole point of like the story is like, how amazingly the hero was killed, and how it had such, subtle influence and like deep resonating impact on everyone around him, and it's such a poignant, basically, finisher. And then he's like, yeah, but I'm the hero of the story. I don't want to have that happen to me. I mean, and he kind of starts looking at it, and it's like, well, what if reality is in some sense kind of like that? Like we as a society are almost kind of writing this type of stuff for ourselves, and like we as a society need to like, some sense step back and go, wait, do we want to be writing this kind of stuff for ourselves? Sure, it's beautiful and poignant, but at the same point, I mean, is that what we actually want our lives to be? I mean, is beautiful and poignant but then gone? Maybe. I mean, maybe in the grand scheme of things, that is actually a more beautiful finish. I don't know. But then at the same point is like something like the never-ending story, where, you have something, it's beautiful, and then you move on to the next beautiful thing. I don't know. That might be better too. Anyways, all for that one.